The sharp rip of cloth sliced through the quiet atmosphere like a knife. Maya Thompson positioned herself at Murphy's Tavern's center, her uncovered back visible under the stark yellow lighting. Her Delta Force ink stretched across her dark skin, causing every person present to hold their breath. Rex Morrison's blade shimmered in his shaking grip, his expression shifting from smugness to something completely different. Terror. Thick tension filled the atmosphere. 30 sets of eyes focused on the African-American woman who had just destroyed their concept of dominance. However, to comprehend how a simple tattoo could paralyze an entire establishment full of seasoned criminals, we must return 6 months to Maya's initial entrance through those doors, bearing secrets that would transform everything. Maya Thompson dried another drinking glass with systematic care. Her actions were purposeful and measured, resembling a marksman maintaining their weapon. Every 30 seconds, her gaze surveyed the establishment. Emergency routes initially, followed by hands, then expressions, a routine ingrained in muscle memory from years in locations where alertness equaled survival. At 34 years old, she measured 5 feet 6 inches with a lean frame that misled most into believing she was delicate. They failed to observe how she positioned herself against walls, or how her fingers naturally located the center of balance in any item she handled. Murphy O'Brien observed her from his position at the cash register, recognizing something in her quiet demeanor that ordinary citizens never could. The 65-year-old Vietnam War veteran had employed her 6 months prior without questions, comprehending that certain stories were inscribed in wounds rather than spoken words. Murphy's establishment wasn't impressive to behold. Weathered leather seats, marked wooden surfaces, and a music machine that repeated the same 20 songs continuously. Yet for Maya, the modest room above the tavern had become her sanctuary, her refuge from a world uncertain how to handle damaged soldiers. Nightly, she awakened abruptly at 3:17 a.m. The imaginary burden of her M4 rifle pressed against her shoulder, the sharp scent of heated metal flooding her senses. During these instances, her hand would search for the location where her weapon strap once rested, discovering only the elevated tissue of healed injuries. She had mastered muffling her cries into her pillow, synchronizing her breathing with distant traffic noise until the desert dissolved back into suburban existence. Summer's heat pressed against the tavern glass, yet Maya donned long sleeves during every shift, the material concealing the narrative etched into her skin. Patrons quickly discovered she communicated through nods and hand signals, serving beverages with an efficiency that suggested discipline rather than hostility. When preparing limes for evening customers, regulars would halt their discussions, observing her knife technique. Not like a server, but like someone who had utilized sharp instruments for purposes they preferred not to contemplate. "That woman carries phantoms," Murphy had once remarked to his spouse. She had agreed, understanding that some spirits wore military uniforms and carried identification tags. Every Friday at 8 o'clock, the roar of motorcycle engines would vibrate the tavern's glass, and Maya would observe the change commence. Discussions ceased mid-sentence. Couples suddenly recalled urgent commitments, and even the most intoxicated customers sobered sufficiently to pay their bills and depart. The Steel Wolves Motorcycle Club had claimed Friday evenings at Murphy's for 3 years, since Rex Morrison determined the elderly man's establishment would compensate for protection it never requested. Murphy would count $500 in worn 20s, placing them in an envelope he maintained ready like a diabetic keeps medication. Maya watched this ceremony from behind the counter, her jaw clenched but her hands steady, having discovered that survival sometimes required selecting which conflicts to avoid. The previous week had challenged that determination when Rex dragged Jimmy Chen from his electronics store 2 blocks away, demonstrating what occurred when protection payments fell short. Maya had been disposing of refuse when she heard the screams, witnessed Rex's boot striking Jimmy's ribs repeatedly while his associates laughed and recorded it on their devices. Her body had tensed like a coiled spring, muscle memory demanding intervention, but she had forced herself to turn away, to remember why she couldn't risk being noticed. The shame of that moment had penetrated deeply, another wound to include in her collection. That evening, she had bent to retrieve a shattered bottle, and her collar had shifted enough to expose the puckered scar along her jaw, a memento from Kandahar typically hidden beneath carefully arranged hair. The motorcycle sound grew nearer, and Maya experienced the familiar chest tightness, the heightened awareness that had preserved her life in Afghanistan, now causing her hands to tremble while arranging bottles behind the counter. Murphy's aged fingers shook as he prepared the envelope, and their eyes connected across the room, 2 veterans from different conflicts recognizing identical burdens in each other's postures. Something was different this evening, though Maya couldn't identify it yet. The air tasted metallic, resembling blood or ammunition, and her instincts screamed warnings she had learned never to disregard. What would transpire next would destroy 6 months of carefully built invisibility. However, Maya remained unaware. All she knew was her hands had ceased trembling, and that seemed extremely dangerous indeed. 8 motorcycles thundered into the parking area like mechanized storms, their chrome exhausts spewing defiance at the peaceful suburban evening. Rex Morrison dismounted initially, 6 feet 1 inch of sculpted hatred wrapped in leather and denim, his arms decorated with tattoos narrating stories of earned rather than purchased violence. He kicked the tavern entrance hard enough to splinter the wood, relishing how conversations died and gazes dropped to study suddenly captivating drink surfaces. Behind him, Tommy Bulldog Martinez and 4 additional steel wolves created an intimidation barrier, their presence converting the comfortable bar into a prison. Rex's scarred knuckles popped as he flexed them, a sound resembling breaking bones that made Murphy recoil from across the establishment. Well, Murphy," Rex's voice carried the casual brutality that stemmed from never facing repercussions. He seized a chair and reversed it, mounting it like a throne, while his eyes swept the room with predatory satisfaction. "Business appears profitable tonight. Very profitable. Which indicates you've been withholding from me, elderly man." Murphy's hands trembled as he slid the envelope across the counter. $500 that might have been blood currency. "That's all we agreed upon, Rex." "Same as usual." But Rex wasn't concerned with agreements tonight. He was interested in power, in the sweet flavor of fear that seasoned every interaction. "Agreements evolve, Murphy. The economy's difficult. My associates require more. 800 monthly starting immediately." The words suspended in the atmosphere like a noose constricting around Murphy's throat. "Rex, please. I cannot afford." The strike came swiftly, Rex's open hand connecting with Murphy's cheek forcefully enough to snap the elderly man's head sideways. Tommy laughed, a sound like grinding machinery, while the other bikers dispersed through the establishment like a disease, deliberately overturning drinks and treading on fallen napkins with muddy footwear. Rex seized a full beer from a nearby surface and poured it slowly onto the floor, his gaze never departing Murphy's face. "Clean that," he commanded. But his stare had discovered Maya, who had stepped forward with a bar cloth. "Well, greetings there. Didn't realize Murphy kept animals." Maya moved with careful precision, kneeling to absorb the spilled beer while positioning her body between Rex and Murphy. Her movements were too fluid, too calculated, and Rex noticed. "What's your name, woman?" The racial epithet he had nearly used remained unspoken but present, contaminating the air between them. Maya didn't respond, just continued cleaning. Yet her silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. Rex's boot pressed down on her hand, securing it to the floor. "I asked you a question. Are you deaf in addition to mute?" Still, Maya said nothing, though the tendons in her neck protruded like cables under strain. Murphy attempted to stand, blood trickling from his split lip. "Her name's Maya. She merely works here, Rex. Keep her out of this." What makes a person with elite military training so dangerous? Their capacity to wait, to endure, to select the perfect moment to attack. However, Rex Morrison had never confronted a genuine warrior, only civilians too frightened to resist. "Maya." Rex rolled the name around his mouth like cheap liquor. Pretty name for Murphy's black. The slur landed like an explosive, but Maya's only reaction was a slight jaw tightening. She rose slowly, towel in hand, and met Rex's eyes with a steadiness that made Tommy shift uncomfortably. "Oh, this one has some backbone," Rex grinned, displaying teeth like broken grave markers. "I appreciate that. Makes it more entertaining when they shatter." He shoved Murphy again, harder this time, sending the elderly man crashing into the shelves behind the counter. Glass exploded, whiskey mixed with blood on the floor, and something shifted in Maya's posture. Subtle but definitive, like a safety being disengaged. "That's not how you resolve problems." Her voice cut through the chaos with military precision. Each word measured and controlled. The entire establishment froze. Rex's face cycled through several expressions, surprise, amusement, then fury. Did this woman just instruct me how to conduct my business?" Tommy and the others formed a tighter circle, their hands drifting toward concealed weapons. Maya didn't move, didn't blink, just held Rex's stare with the kind of calm that comes from facing death and finding it inadequate. "I said," Rex stood, his full height towering over her, "do you know who I am?" What transpired next would transform Murphy's Tavern from a quiet suburban bar into a battlefield where true strength would be measured not in muscles or numbers, but in the courage to stand when everyone else kneels. Rex Morrison charged like a bull, 220 pounds of rage aimed at the black woman who dared challenge his authority. Maya sidestepped at the final microsecond, using his momentum to send him crashing into a table that exploded into fragments. The other bikers surged forward but stopped when Maya grabbed a broken bottle, holding it with the practiced grip of someone who had wielded worse weapons in darker places. "Stay back," she commanded, and something in her voice, that bone-deep authority, made even Tommy hesitate. Rex scrambled to his feet, his face purple with humiliation, and lunged again. This time, Maya didn't dodge. She met him head-on, her smaller frame somehow absorbing his impact, redirecting his force with techniques that didn't belong in any street fight. Her elbow found his solar plexus. Her knee drove into his thigh's nerve cluster. And suddenly, the larger man was gasping, off balance, confused. "You little..." Rex's hands found purchase on Maya's shirt, fingers digging into the fabric as they grappled. Maya twisted, trying to break free, but Rex's grip was iron. The sound of tearing cotton split the air like a gunshot. Time slowed to a crawl as Maya's shirt gave way, revealing the canvas of her back to the harsh tavern lights. The tattoo sprawled across her dark skin like a declaration of war. The distinctive Delta Force insignia with its sword and 3 lightning bolts surrounded by intricate military imagery. Below it, in stark lettering, SGT Maya Thompson, Purple Heart recipient, Operation Enduring Freedom, 2019 to 2022. A pair of detailed dog tags were inked at the base with "Never Forgotten" etched beneath them. The artwork was beautiful and terrible, professional military tattoo work that told a story of service, sacrifice, and survival. The bar fell silent as a grave. 30 people collectively held their breath, processing what they were seeing. Even the jukebox seemed to pause between songs as if paying respect. Rex's hands dropped to his sides, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Tommy Bulldog Martinez, who had done 2 tours in Iraq before turning to crime, recognized the insignia immediately. His face went pale beneath his beard. "Holy shit," someone whispered. "She's Delta." The words rippled through the crowd like electricity. Delta Force, the Army's most elite special operations unit. Warriors so classified most of their missions would never be known. And not just any Delta operator, but a Purple Heart recipient. She had bled for her country, and here she was, serving drinks in a rundown tavern. But Rex Morrison had built his reputation on never backing down, and his pride wouldn't let him process what he was seeing. His confusion curdled into something uglier, mockery born from fear. "Oh, this is rich," he sneered, though his voice cracked slightly. "Murphy's got himself a broken toy soldier. What's wrong, sweetheart? Still hearing the bombs in your head?" He circled her now like a hyena testing wounded prey. "Purple Heart, heh? That means you got hurt. Means you failed." Maya stood motionless, her exposed back straight, hands loose at her sides, but her breathing had changed, become shallow and rapid. "How many of your squad came home in boxes because you weren't good enough?" Rex pressed, sensing weakness. "Do you see their faces when you close your eyes? Do their families know you're hiding in this shithole instead of? How many times can a warrior's heart break before it becomes unbreakable?" Maya had asked herself that question every night for 2 years. And now she finally had her answer. The flashback hit like an IED, sudden, violent, undeniable. She was back in Kandahar province, the taste of dust and cordite filling her mouth. The explosion had flipped their MAP like a toy, and Specialist Williams was screaming, his leg gone below the knee. She dragged him to cover while taking fire, her shoulder blooming with pain where shrapnel found gaps in her armor. "Stay with me, Williams. Stay with me." But there were too many wounded, not enough hands, and the medevac was taking fire. She had made choices that night, decisions about who to save first, and those choices followed her home like ghosts. Her hands shook now, that familiar tremor that meant her PTSD was winning. Rex saw it and smiled, thinking he had found her breaking point. "There it is," Rex crooned. "The crazy showing through. What are you going to do, hero? Cry? Run away like you ran from?" But Maya wasn't running. She was transforming. The shaking stopped as suddenly as it had started, replaced by something else, a stillness that preceded violence the way lightning preceded thunder. "You know nothing about sacrifice," she said, her voice carrying the weight of every flag-draped coffin she had saluted. "You know nothing about carrying the weight of other people's lives in your hands, about making impossible choices in impossible situations." She turned to face him fully, no longer hiding, no longer ashamed. "You want to know what this tattoo means? It means I've been to hell and back. It means I've paid prices you can't imagine for freedoms you don't deserve." The crowd stirred, understanding dawning like sunrise after the longest night. Murphy pulled himself upright, blood still on his chin, but pride in his eyes. That's enough, Rex. An older man in the corner spoke up. Turned out he was a Marine veteran from Desert Storm. You're talking to a goddamn hero. Others found their voices, their courage. She served our country while you were selling meth to teenagers, a woman added. Tommy Bulldog looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight as his worldview cracked. But Rex's rage had nowhere to go but forward. His hand went to his belt, and suddenly there was a knife in his fist, 6 inches of serrated steel that had ended arguments before. I don't give a damn what uniform she wore, he snarled. In here, I'm the only authority that matters. What happens when unstoppable rage meets immovable courage? Murphy's Tavern was about to find out. The knife flashed toward Maya's throat, but her hands moved faster, muscle memory forged in life or death seconds half a world away. She deflected Rex's wrist with her left forearm while her right hand snaked around, finding the pressure point that made his fingers spasm open. The knife clattered to the floor as Maya continued the motion, using Rex's own momentum to flip him over her hip in a textbook throw that would have made her combatives instructor proud. Rex hit the floor hard enough to drive the air from his lungs. And before he could recover, Maya had him in a control hold, not the brutal choke he deserved, but the measured restraint of a professional. I don't want to hurt anyone, she said, her knee pressing into his spine just enough to keep him immobilized. But I will protect those I care about. That's what soldiers do. The transformation in the room was electric, like watching people wake from a collective nightmare. Tommy Bulldog Martinez stepped forward, but not to help Rex. Instead, he kicked the fallen knife further away. Stay down, Rex, he said quietly. You've lost. Other patrons found their courage in Maya's example. The Marine veteran from the corner stood, then another, then a young woman whose brother was serving overseas. Soon, 30 people were on their feet, forming a protective wall between Maya and the remaining steel wolves. This is our bar, Murphy said, his voice stronger than it had been in years. And she's one of us. The bikers looked at each other, confused and outnumbered, their usual intimidation tactics useless against a community that had found its spine. Rex struggled against Maya's hold, spitting curses, but she maintained control with minimal force, enough to restrain, not enough to injure. The police arrived in force. Someone had called during the fight, and Detective Sarah Kim entered with 4 uniformed officers, her hand on her service weapon. She had been building a case against the Steel Wolves for 18 months, but witnesses always recanted, too scared to testify. Tonight was different. He pulled a knife on her, Murphy said immediately. We all saw it. The chorus of agreement was overwhelming. He's been extorting businesses for years, the Marine veteran added. $500 a month from Murphy, more from others. Tommy Bulldog Martinez stepped forward, and Rex's eyes widened in betrayal. I'm done with this, Tommy announced. Detective Kim, I'll tell you everything. The drug deals, the protection racket, where we keep the books, all of it. The silence that followed was deafening. You fucking rat, Rex wheezed from the floor, but Tommy just shook his head. I followed you because I thought you were strong. But he gestured at Maya, who was helping Murphy to a chair, she showed me what real strength looks like. It's not about hurting people weaker than you. It's about protecting them, even when it costs you everything. 2 other Steel Wolves members nodded, stepping away from their bikes. We're out, too. Detective Kim's body camera captured everything as witnesses gave statements. The security footage from Murphy's system showed Rex's assault, the knife attack, and Maya's measured response. Combined with hate crime charges for the racial slurs, Rex was looking at serious time. His family's money might buy good lawyers, but it couldn't erase video evidence or 30 witnesses with matching stories. The story exploded across social media within hours. Female Delta Force veteran defends bar from racist biker went viral, shared by military groups, women's organizations, and civil rights advocates. News crews appeared the next morning, but Maya wasn't hiding anymore. She stood in front of Murphy's Tavern wearing a tank top, her tattoo visible for the world to see, and spoke truth into microphones. For 6 months, I tried to hide who I was, thinking my scars made me weak. But real strength isn't about hiding. It's about standing up for what's right, even when your hands shake. The interview clip was viewed 10 million times in 3 days. Donations poured in for Murphy's Tavern. Veterans organizations reached out. Maya had become something she never expected, a symbol of resilience. But whose life changes most when the truth comes to light? Sometimes it's not who you'd expect. 3 months later, Rex Morrison sat in federal prison, his empire crumbled, his family disowned him. The Steel Wolves had disbanded, their members either arrested or scattered. Tommy Martinez had opened an auto shop that exclusively hired veterans, giving second chances to those who had served. But the biggest transformation happened at Murphy's Tavern. What had been a rundown bar became a gathering place for veterans dealing with PTSD. Maya led weekly support groups, sharing her story to help others confront their demons. "I thought I was protecting myself by hiding," she told the group one Thursday night. "But isolation isn't safety. It's just another kind of prison." Murphy had recovered fully, and he had legally made Maya a partner in the bar. Together, they had created something beautiful from something broken. The ripple effect spread beyond their small town. Maya's story inspired other veterans to seek help instead of hiding. Female veterans especially reached out, saying her visibility helped them feel less alone. She testified before a congressional committee about the unique challenges facing women veterans. She consulted with the VA about improving PTSD treatment programs. But most importantly, she kept tending bar at Murphy's, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up, scars and all. "Every time I put on this tank top and show my tattoo," she told a documentary filmmaker, "I'm telling every struggling veteran that it's okay to be wounded. It's okay to need help. What's not okay is giving up." Her phone buzzed constantly now, veterans in crisis, media requests, speaking engagements, but she always made time for the broken warriors who found their way to Murphy's door. 6 months had passed since the night that changed everything, and Maya Thompson stood behind the bar at Murphy's Tavern. But she was unrecognizable from the woman who had hidden in long sleeves and silence. She wore a black tank top that displayed her Delta Force tattoo with pride, her movements confident as she mixed drinks for the Thursday night crowd. The bar itself had transformed, too: new paint, upgraded furniture, and a wall of honor displaying photos of local veterans. Murphy worked alongside her, their partnership official now, treating her like the daughter he had never had. The regular crowd had evolved from drinkers seeking escape to a community seeking connection. Veterans, their families, and supporters filled tables where thugs once counted extortion money. Maya smiled, actually smiled, as she served a group of female veterans who had driven 2 hours just to meet her. The bell above the door chimed, and a young Asian woman entered, her movement speaking of military bearing despite civilian clothes. She stood frozen in the doorway, scanning exits and counting occupants, habits Maya recognized intimately. The woman was maybe 25, with the 1,000-yard stare that came from seeing too much too young. She approached the bar with the careful steps of someone navigating a minefield, her hands visible, non-threatening. "Excuse me," her voice barely carried over the classic rock playing softly. "Are you Sergeant Thompson?" Maya set down the glass she was polishing, giving the woman her full attention. "I am. And you don't have to call me Sergeant anymore, just Maya." The relief that flooded the younger woman's face was heartbreaking. "I'm Jessica Chen, Army medic. Just got back from Syria 2 months ago." Jessica's story spilled out in fragments: the convoy ambush, the soldier she couldn't save, the nightmares that made her afraid to sleep. "I saw your story online," she said, tears threatening. "My mom sent me the article. I've been sitting in my car outside for an hour trying to get the courage to come in." Maya came around the bar, guiding Jessica to a quiet corner booth. "6 months ago, I was hiding from my own shadow," Maya said, sitting across from her. "I thought my scars made me weak. That showing them meant I had failed somehow." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing shrapnel scars along her forearm. "But these aren't signs of failure. They're proof of battles survived." Jessica traced her own hidden scars unconsciously. "I can't stop seeing their faces, the ones who didn't make it." Maya reached across the table, warrior to warrior. "They never leave us, but we honor them by living, by helping others who are fighting the same battles." Murphy appeared with 2 cups of coffee. He always knew when conversation needed caffeine more than alcohol. The old veteran nodded at Jessica with understanding before returning to the bar. "You know what I learned?" Maya continued. "Strength isn't about hiding wounds. It's about sharing them so others know they're not alone." She gestured around the bar where several groups were deep in conversation. "Half these people are veterans or family members. We've created something here, a place where you don't have to pretend you're okay." Jessica's shoulders relaxed slightly. "My family doesn't understand. They want the old me back, but she died in that desert." Maya's response carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. "You can't go back, but you can go forward. And you don't have to do it alone." Have you ever wondered if sharing your darkest moments could become your greatest strength? Maya Thompson discovered that answer, and now she was passing it on. The transformation of Murphy's Tavern had caught national attention. What started as one woman's refusal to let a bully win had evolved into a movement. They now hosted weekly support groups, job fairs for veterans, and family counseling sessions. The model was being replicated in 12 other cities, with Maya consulting via video calls. Tommy Martinez often stopped by, his own auto shop thriving with 15 veteran employees. "You saved my life that night," he told Maya once, "not from Rex, but from what I was becoming." Even some former Steel Wolves members had found redemption through community service. But the most profound changes were in the small moments: veterans learning to sleep without nightmares, families reconnecting, survivors becoming mentors. Detective Sarah Kim entered the bar, but not on official business anymore. She had become a regular, part of the extended family that Murphy's had created. "Maya, I've got news," she announced, unable to contain her smile. The Department of Veterans Affairs approved the grant. Murphy's model is going national. The bar erupted in cheers. Maya felt Murphy's weathered hand on her shoulder, steady and proud. "From one small act of courage," Kim continued, "you've created a nationwide movement. They want you as the national coordinator." Jessica, who had been listening intently, looked at Maya with awe. "You did all this?" Maya shook her head. "We all did this. Every person who stands up instead of hiding, who shares their story instead of suffering alone, they're all part of it." The celebration was interrupted by Maya's phone buzzing. She glanced at the screen, a number from Washington, D.C. "Maya Thompson? This is Senator Patricia Williams. We'd like you to testify before the Armed Services Committee about improving veteran mental health services." Maya's hand trembled slightly. Old habits die hard, but her voice was steady. "I'll be there." As she hung up, Murphy raised a toast. "To Maya Thompson, who showed us that real strength comes from facing our demons, not running from them." Glasses raised throughout the bar, but Maya's mind was already moving forward. There were thousands of veterans still hiding, still suffering in silence. Her war wasn't over, it had just changed battlefields. 6 weeks later, Maya stood before Congress, her tattoo visible beneath her professional blazer. "Every day, 22 veterans take their own lives," she testified. "Not because they are weak, but because they are fighting alone. We can change that." Her words carried the authority of lived experience. Behind her sat Murphy, Jessica, Tommy, and a dozen other veterans whose lives had been transformed. The committee listened with rare attention as Maya outlined a national program based on Murphy's Tavern, safe spaces in communities where veterans already gathered. "We don't need more studies or statistics. We need connection, understanding, and the courage to show our scars." The proposal passed unanimously. As Maya flew back home, she thought about the journey from that night Rex tore her shirt to this moment. The woman who had hidden in long sleeves was gone, replaced by someone who understood that vulnerability could be the ultimate strength. Murphy's Tavern still needed her on Thursday nights, and that mattered as much as any congressional testimony. Because change happened one person at a time, one story at a time, one moment of courage building on another. Jessica now co-led support groups, paying forward what she had received. New faces appeared every week, men and women carrying invisible wounds, searching for hope. And they found it in the most unlikely place, a suburban bar where a woman's tattoo had once stopped time. The final image was perfect in its simplicity. Maya behind the bar, tattoo visible, surrounded by people she had helped who were now helping others. Above the door, a new sign: Murphy's Tavern, Veterans Welcome, Safe Space, No One Fights Alone. Because sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin not with armies or governments, but with one person refusing to hide their truth. Maya's phone buzzed again, another veteran in crisis, another opportunity to turn pain into purpose. She answered without hesitation. "This is Maya. You're not alone. Let's talk." The cycle continued. Each act of courage creating ripples that would touch lives for generations. True strength, she had learned, wasn't in the battles you won, but in the warriors you helped find their way home.